Recording the meeting already. Okay, so I'll just start with a few announcements. So next Monday, we are going to read and discuss in class this paper by a few of your instructors, led by Barrett Salisbury, who now works in Alaska. And it's a very good paper about validating fault offset measurements from different geomorphic markers. Includes some discussion, for example, of how to give quality rankings to different measurements, which is a topic that you should all be thinking about with reference to your mapping. So I would like 3 more students to please volunteer to lead the discussion on this paper. So next Tuesday, and following a very similar format to your classmates last week. So to give a 15-minute or so presentation on this paper, then to have some questions and try to engage in a discussion with your classmates.
I can do that.
Is that Sean?
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Sean.
This is Jackie.
Jackie and Rachel then. The other 2.
Great, thank you guys for volunteering. So I had a few other announcements for today. So your final reports for this first mapping project are due 2 weeks from yesterday. So you should be thinking about the fact that you've done probably more than half of the mapping, and so thinking about how you want to write the final report. And again, we'll try to get these reports back to you as fast as you can so that you can take our comments into consideration for the second mapping project. And so on Thursday, we'll have, again, our first group give their mapping updates. We'll have 6 people present, so I'm going to keep everyone strictly to 10 minutes. We had a little bit extra time last week, but yeah, I'm going to be more strict with time this week, so please prepare a short PowerPoint presentation. And remember, the main turn-in from this assignment is your line work of the faults. And so I'd like everyone to show next week at least one slide, on Thursday, at least one slide of features that you are pretty confident about calling them faults. And I'd also like you to discuss how you are starting to develop your quality ranking. So for example, what numbers are you going to use, say 1 to 4? What are the different descriptions of what does quality ranking 1 mean, and so forth, all the way to 4. And in particular, think about how these quality rankings pertain to both the geomorphic environment where you are working, as well as the data sets where you are working. For example, we expect someone who is working with air photographs from the 1960s to have a different quality ranking than someone who's working from LiDAR data from just a few years ago. Does that sound good? Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
This is Sean. So
Hi, Sean.
do you prefer the PowerPoint, or can we just walk through the project and show you like what we were doing? What do you prefer?
I would prefer a PowerPoint. I think it's easier to keep keep the time and to prepare just exactly what you want to show. There's also, there's a little bit of a delay, I think, for many people's screens between what you're pointing at and what it shows. So it's a little bit clearer if your screen is just still.
I think it also makes you kind of think ahead a little bit, just what you want to talk about, to select a few slides. So, you know, I realize it's nice to have that dynamic clicking around, showing what you're doing, but for efficiency, I think that synthesis step is valuable.
Sounds good. Thanks.
And also, yeah, as Ramon said, synthesis, especially as you think about your quality rankings, you could even write out the draft of what your several different, the vocabulary that you're going to use for your different quality rankings. Are there any other questions? So Ramon and I have been doing some more georeferencing for several areas. Please, again, don't hesitate to send us more imagery. It's easier if you send us just 1 or 2 pictures at a time. We georeference them, send them back to you, you can check. Then say you send us like 10 pictures at a time, because that's just a much bigger job. And then it's a little bit harder to give you immediate feedback. And oh yeah, I'll have office hours today from 2 to 3. I have 1 request to stay after class and talk with someone. So yeah, please continue to take advantage of these office hour times. So that's it for announcements, unless there's any more questions. Okay, so today we have a very special class where a few of your instructors who have had various experiences in industry and geologic consulting have agreed to share their experiences with you, as well as answer some questions that you have. So today we'll be hearing from Tim, Steve, and Alex. So we'll let them speak each for a few minutes, and then as they're speaking, please think about questions that you want to ask them. So for example, more about what they do in their job, what attracted them to their job, how they built a resume, how they networked, how you could network in COVID-19 days, and so forth. And so we'll let this go for as long as it's beneficial, basically as long as people have questions. And then I have a few slides to discuss about LiDAR data.
Yeah, and I'll just thank everybody, thank the instructors in advance for this, because you know, it's really valuable for our students to hear about, you know, people with real jobs and how you got there. You know, I think the students a lot of times hear from people who've been in academia for a while like me, and we can speak to what we think is important, but the reality is still not there for us, and that's beyond academia. So really grateful, and I hope you students can really take advantage of this unusual opportunity.
So whoever would like to go first, please feel free. If you want to share any slides, I've enabled screen sharing for everyone.
Tim, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll start off. You know, I have some slides to share, and it's a little bit of a shameless like recruitment for CGS, but I think there's some valuable stuff in this presentation. Let's see if I can. There it is. Share. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Is that working? So yeah, I'll give a brief overview of sort of what we do at CGS and sort of how I got here. CGS is pretty diverse in what we do, and so I'll touch on a little bit of our different programs.
Hey, Tim.
Yeah.
I don't know about others, but oh, there you go.
Is that better? Can you see the full slide?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you had your Zoom in front of it first, and
Yeah.
it blocks out the screen.
Yeah, we can see it now.
Yep, we can see it.
That's cool. So this is just sort of my professional background, and I've been doing this for a while. So I got my bachelor's at University of Oregon. That's really how I got into active faulting. I was Ray Weldon, the professor up there. He's very much into active faulting, much like Ramon. And I took his structure class, and he was basically like one spring he was looking for field assistants for his grad students. And so I ended up going down to work on a paleoseismic project with him and his student then at the time, Gordon Seitz, who's now at CGS with me. And I just loved it. We were trenching on the San Andreas Fault, and it was just like the coolest thing ever to me. And that's basically when I got really into geology. I was interested in other things in geology, like minerals and economic geology was one strong interest I had at the time, and I was seriously considering going into that. But it was really like active faulting that got my interest. And so I'll just cut to the chase right there. And as students, that's the advice I have for you right now is that, take whatever opportunities you can to like work with other graduate students as field assistants or whatever, and get that experience while you're in school, because that just opens a lot of doors. Which kind of brings me to my first job in geology after I graduated, which I was a geologist at the Yucca Mountain Project. And that was largely a result of the networking I did in undergraduate, where I met some of Ray's graduate students, and he had a graduate student, Silvio Pezzapani, who had gone on to the USGS, and he was looking for a geologist at Yucca Mountain Project, which was sort of a proposed nuclear waste repository in Nevada. And so I started working there doing paleoseismic work and data compilation. And that's where all this fault displacement hazards activity and stuff started for me. We were compiling data for normal faulting and trying to apply it to the normal faults at Yucca Mountain. But yeah, it's for a lot of careers in geology, you need bigger, more advanced degrees. And so at the time I was like, okay, well, I'll go back to school, and I decided I wanted to do paleoseismology. And so I ended up going to San Diego State, where Tom Rockwell was teaching, and did my master's on the Garlock Fault there. Also got a lot of practical experience because Tom always has a lot of projects going on around the world. And he was very generous and invited me to go work with him in Turkey and other places, not just specific to my master's project. And then after I got my master's degree, I went to the USGS as a geologist and continued doing a lot of trenching projects. Earthquake rupture mapping, went up to the Denali Fault after the earthquake in 2002. Mapped that rupture with colleagues at the USGS, such as Peter Heusler. And then I sort of had, it wasn't quite a break, but my partner at the time, now spouse, she's an attorney. And so she had a job opportunity back east. And so we decided to go back east and do that. And during that time, I was basically doing consulting geology, and it was just project by project work for various companies, including just myself. I would be under contract with people to do certain types of work. We had contracts with USGS and with SCEC, Southern California Earthquake Center, Earth Consultants International, did some projects, working with Tom Rockwell again, in different parts of the world. There were projects in Panama that Chris Badugo worked on. We also did a project in Portugal for paleoseismology, some faults near some dams in Portugal. Did that for a few years, and then eventually when we moved back to California, I ended up at the California Geological Survey. Again, largely because of some of the networking that I'd done throughout all this time. I happened to know pretty well the guy that hired me, Chris Wills, CGS. He was a manager there. He had a position opening up and encouraged me to apply. And so that's where I've been since 2007. And I've sort of followed the career path that I was an engineering geologist. That's our classifications for geologists at CGS. And eventually I ended up running the fault mapping program. So that's my career in a nutshell. But why I was interested in geology, I think one of the things that really gets me going about geology is that it's really, I like the intersection of basic research and applied science. And you can see some examples of that, not just specific to my career on this slide, whether it's, looking at recurrence intervals on the San Jacinto Fault in Southern California. This is work that I helped Tom Rockwell with and others. But this is sort of basic research in terms of like how the faults behave, but it's also applied research, whereas like, okay, this all goes into seismic hazard models for California. But you can see other examples of this intersection of basic and applied research. There's just basic structural mapping, but you can apply that to look for oil and gas. There's hazards mapping, landslide down in Southern California. And then there's, geotechnical work, such as the Caldecott Tunnel, requires geologists to go look at the geology when they're excavating that. The other thing that really got me into geology was that it just took me to a lot of interesting places. And I've been around the world looking at geology. Some of it's, very project specific, such as Alaska and Panama and New Zealand, but other stuff is just sort of vacation geology. So, trips to Vanuatu or the Grand Canyon. It's hard for me to get away from it. So for students, the state of California actually employs a lot of geologists or scientists, and these are just some of the departments and agencies that employ geologists throughout the state. Caltrans employs a lot of engineering geologists. I think on this list, probably the Department of Conservation, which CGS is under, employs the most geologists. I think the State Water Resources Control Board also employs about 200. They're classified as engineering geologists, but they have expertise in hydrogeology. Same with toxic substances control. A lot of groundwater issues related to pollutants and water quality. So within Department of Conservation, there's CGS, there's CalGEM, which is the California Geologic Energy Management Division, which deals with oil and gas in the state. And then there's mine reclamation, which deals with mitigation and reclamation of old mining sites in California. So CGS, this is the mission statement of CGS, and it's basically, we're trying to apply geology to issues in California, so that deal with the health, safety, and business interests. So there's economic issues, such as this pie graph, which shows, aggregate resources in California, and we do inventories for that. I'll talk a little bit about that, but we also do basic geologic mapping. And then a lot of what I'm involved with is a lot of seismic hazards mapping. So related to different hazards such as ground shaking, we run a network of instruments throughout the state. We do some paleoseismic research, and then we do liquefaction and landslide mapping. So the overview for CGS within the state is that we employ about 60 engineering geologists at any one time. We also have about 4 civil engineers on staff. We have about 30 technical staff, which are GIS specialists, as well as seismic instrument technicians, and then 20-ish administrative support folks. And we have offices around the state, but our main headquarters office is here in Sacramento. And then we have 2 regional offices in Los Angeles and San Mateo, and then some smaller offices scattered throughout the northwest of the state, Redding, Eureka, and Santa Rosa. So the kinds of experience and education that we have at CGS when people come in, it's big variety of backgrounds and experience. So, you know, we have people with degrees and bachelor's degrees in geology, master's degrees and PhDs. I don't think there's any one degree that dominates within CGS. It's a good mix across the board. But most folks that come in have previous experience as consultant geologists or at other state agencies. But typically when people come to CGS, they stay. We have a pretty high retention of geologists come to CGS. It's very rare that people leave before their careers, before they retire. So kind of joke that it's a 20 to life sentence when you come into CGS. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but professional licensure, that's a professional license in geology, PG, is typically required for the upper pay scales at CGS, and it's preferred for hiring because a lot of what we do needs a license. And then there's other registrations such as the Certified Engineering Geologist registration and Certified Hydrogeologist license or registration that are desirable but not required for jobs at CGS. I'll just quickly blow through some of the different programs we have. We have a Mineral Resources and Hazards program at CGS, and a lot of what they do is they map and take inventories of available aggregate, sand and gravel resources throughout the state. It's economically, it's vital that we have these resources available for construction throughout the state. And so one of the things they do is they take inventories and assess how much aggregate might be available for building within different areas. A smaller program that they have is just a mineral hazards project where they map areas of asbestos, which is common in the foothills and different parts of the coastal ranges. They also look for radon potential and map that as well. One of the bigger programs at CGS is our geologic mapping program, and it's funded through either funds dedicated to geologic mapping, or we also apply for state map grants from the USGS, and we do these regional geologic mapping projects, which is sort of a combination of original geologic mapping and compilation. Typically, they're done at 1 to 24,000 scale. These are fed into regional compilations, such as the statewide geologic map, but we also have a series of 1 to 100,000 scale maps that we do. And then a lot of the geologists in this program, they spend time doing landslide mapping and inventories, either for project-specific types of landslide maps. This one's an example of one we did for Caltrans along this highway corridor, or for regional landslide inventories, which feed into some of the seismic hazard maps that we make. Our forest and watershed geology program, a lot of this is done up in Northwest California and the Sierras, where there's requirements before they do like timber harvest in an area to have a geologic assessment for landslide and erosion potential. And so the group that does this, it's very intense work. It's very field intensive. They get to motor around in ATVs, which is pretty fun. But it's basically, you know, engineering geology applied to forest watershed management. And then the program that I'm in is the seismic hazards program, and we have various mandates in state law about the kinds of seismic hazard mapping that has to be done. For me, I'm mostly involved with surface fault rupture mapping potential under the AP Act, Alquist-Creola Act. But we have other types of earthquake-related hazards that we do, such as liquefaction potential mapping. That's under the Seismic Hazards Mapping Act. Landslide, earthquake-induced landslides, it's also under there. And then one of our newer programs is a tsunami mapping program, which basically defines tsunami run-ups and evacuation zones along the coast where there's a potential for tsunami. This is just an example of what the hazard maps we make. We sort of combine all the different hazards into one seismic hazard map that's an earthquake zone of required investigation. And so basically what they're regulatory maps. And so if you're in one of these colored polygons on the map, you're going to have to do a consulting geologist before they develop a parcel. Will have to do some sort of geologic investigation to identify the potential for these hazards to occur at the site. And so blue is landslides, green is liquefaction, yellow is fault rupture, and then where they overlap, they get a slightly different tinge of those colors on this map. So this is really the main products that I help produce within CGS and in our program.
Just a quick question.
Go ahead.
Liquefaction's when like a material, if a quake happens, it's able to like become loosely consolidated and like kind of like more dangerous to like kind of collapse, right?
Yeah. What happens is it happens in sort of loose, saturated sediments, and when it's shaken, basically it loses its coherence and becomes more liquid than solid. And so reason why we map this is because it affects building foundations, and buildings can collapse or topple when that happens under there. And so the idea is that we make these maps to identify where these hazards occur, and then before they develop a parcel, such on down here in elementary school or whatever, they'll do an investigation to identify whether that hazard affects the site, and then they can propose some mitigation. They can do ground improvement, or just avoid the hazard altogether.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. A lot of what we do is actually review of critical facilities for earthquake hazards, and we do this under contract for different agencies in the state. So what we do a lot of are school site reviews, where we review a consulting report done for a specific school site. And DSA stands for Division of State Architect. That's who we're under contract for. It's required by law under what's called the Field Act that schools are built to a certain standard that resist earthquakes. This is all the product of law of the 1933 Long Beach earthquake in Southern California, where the schools, this is an example, one down here, were built out of brick and mortar basically, and there was a lot of damage. Fortunately, it occurred after school hours, but at the time they were very forward thinking and decided that schools needed to be regulated for earthquake hazards. We also do hospital site reviews. This is a photo from the 1971 San Fernando earthquake, where this carport and parts of the hospital were rendered unusable because of the earthquake. And so following the 1971 earthquake, they also developed this similar set of laws that required hospitals to be built to a certain standard to resist earthquakes and be functional after the earthquake, because it's more important to have a hospital functional rather than just standing after the earthquake. And then sometimes we'll get called out to do reviews of critical facilities such as nuclear power plants or other types of infrastructure for other state agencies without that sort of expertise to do those types of geologic technical reviews. We also maintain a network of seismometers around the state, and this is less geological. It's a lot of engineers, civil engineers, and instrument technicians that maintain this network. I just thought I'd throw it out there. A lot of this instrumentation feeds into building codes. So after an earthquake, they'll analyze the instrumentation in a building. So they'll instrument a tall building from bottom basement to the top to see how it performs during an earthquake, and then use that in terms of engineering design and lessons learned to better design buildings to resist shaking. And then one of the cool things that we get to do is that after some sort of natural disaster event, we'll go out and collect data. And so after an earthquake, we'll go out there and collect information, document surface fault rupture like we did after Ridgecrest last year, in instances of liquefaction landslides. Same with tsunamis. Go out there and document run-up or coastal and harbor effects that damage the harbor as the wave comes into the harbor and moves the boats and rips them from their moorings. And then we also have sort of a newer program. It's a watershed emergency response team, which is called WERT. And it's basically after a wildfire, a fire will burn everything, but it also sort of cook the ground and make it hydrophobic, which increases the likelihood of catastrophic debris flows after an earthquake. When during the rainy season, it'll start raining, all that water will start trickling off the surface because there's no vegetation left to kind of absorb it. And then it basically will go down these drainages and initiate these debris flows. And so what they'll do is they'll go in and sort of measure how much the soil's been affected by the fire and map out areas of debris flow potential. I'm not going to read through this. This is just a typical position description for an engineering geologist at CGS. And it's basically, it boils down to education and experience. I'll provide the slide set to anyone who wants it, or maybe we'll just post it on the class website. But you guys, you're in school right now, so you're getting a lot of knowledge of fundamentals of geology, and encourage you to take classes, with all, to get background in all of this. And then we also assess people based on experience. And, this class is actually really good because it's giving you that experience of fault mapping. Field camp is another way to get experience, is if you're an undergraduate. And then whatever jobs you get in geology gives you that experience as well. So if you're interested in working for the state, it's a little bit of a process, but it's gotten easier. And so the place that I would recommend you go is just this calcareers.ca.gov website. That's for the state of California. And then you can just type in the term engineering geologist. And that's just the classification that they have for everyone that works as a geologist in California. And then what you'll have to do is, if you find a job posting, you'll have to take, they call it a training experience exam. It's really just a questionnaire of your experience, but they'll assign a score to that. And so the higher that you can score on that training experience exam, it'll bring you to the top of an eligibility list. And so that eligibility list will be the pool of candidates that, if you apply for a position and you meet that minimum eligibility, you'll be probably, or hopefully you'll be called in for an interview for that job that you're applying for. And so I always tell people, it's like, don't be shy about your experience and try to get to the top of that eligibility list, because if you can get past that initial screening, you'll be likely called in for an interview. And that's really where you'll be assessed whether you're qualified for the job. So I'll just wrap up with some career advice. I think we all know that, earth science careers, the job market's highly competitive. And so you want to be able to leap out in front of everybody. And so just my advice is get as much practical experience as possible. For engineering geologists at the state, we do a lot of different things. And so a diverse skill set's always desirable. to any potential employer, but especially with the state, you know, we're looking for geologists that have a lot of GIS experience. More and more, a lot of quantitative and programming experience helps. And then finally, or not finally, I think there's one more slide after this. It's like my advice is get licensed or start the process of getting licensed through the ASBOG exam. It's the standardized test that's used in a lot of states for licensing. As undergraduates or recently graduated students, you'll be able to take a fundamentals of geology exam as part of this right away. And then you'll be able to be classified as a geologist in training, a GIT. And then after some experience working under a licensed geologist or someone who's qualified to practice geology, you can take the second part of the exam. And that completes the ASBOG exam. But then for California licensure, there's also a California specific exam. So if you're interested in working in California, it's good to learn about as much about California geology as possible, because that's the third part of this exam. This just repeats what I was saying previously. It's like to apply for state service, you're going to want to take that geologist exam, and these this is not the ASBOG exam. This is the state service exam / questionnaire. These are actually applicable to different agencies depending on which one you take. So you might be considered for, you know, the one that works for conservation, and CGS also works for Department of Water Resources. So you'll be eligible to apply for jobs for different departments. And then I would also just add that, you know, it's good to consider other state agencies in addition to CGS. If you're interested in working for the state, there's Department of Water Resources, Caltrans, they all hire geologists, and lateral transfers within state service is pretty common. So, you know, we've recruited people from Department of Water Resources, Caltrans in the past. And they'll come over from different departments and tend to stay at CGS. I think with that, I'll end there, and we can either take questions or we can go on to Steve. I'll let Chelsea manage how we do this.
Thank you, Tim. I think that was very, very interesting and helpful. Maybe let's have one or two questions that relate directly to Tim's talk, and then so we can get to Steve and Alex, then we'll move on.
How often are you guys actually hiring?
You know, we hire maybe a few people every year. It's usually a matter of attrition. So people will retire and then we'll have a vacancy, or if the program expands. One thing that I should put on your radar is, even though we're sort of in an economic low in California right now because of COVID and the budget, it's been hit somewhat hard. Our department leaders are still very forward thinking. And one thing that we're really looking into expanding on within CGS and Department of Conservation is there's a lot of interest from the administration, the governor's office, with climate change. And so how do we mitigate the geologic effects of climate change, such as sea level rise? And then also carbon sequestration. You know, I think, you know, there would be probably new programs with, you know, how do we sequester carbon in geologic formations and mapping those formations and assessing the viability of different deposits for carbon sequestration. So I see a lot of potential for growth in other areas for CGS, which would also require more hiring.
Thank
Tim,
you.
can you get a license at CGS if you come in without one?
Yeah. We do hire people without licenses. I myself wasn't licensed. I had a lot of experience when I came in, but I never bothered to get a license prior to getting in. So the best thing to do is just demonstrate your desire to get a license. That's why I encourage you to work on getting the first part of that ASVOG exam done, because then it sort of shows that you're interested in getting that license, and it's one hurdle that you've cleared, and you'll be, it's a short path from that point to actually getting fully licensed.
Yeah, and I would say take your test as soon as you can after you graduate. Just, you might as well, because you've got all that stuff fresh in your head. So
yeah, you're absolutely right. I did not take the test right out of school, and I had to like kind of go back and really study hard to like remember all the basics.
I was actually going to take the ASVOG I think this summer was one of the scheduled tests, and they had to cancel it. So I have to wait until the next round, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, they ask a bunch of random stuff. So you definitely want to do it while it's fresh if you can.
Hey Tim, outside of like the ASVOG, are there any other like licensing? Like I was looking at doing something with like trying to find some kind of licensing with like hazard waste, things like that you think would be kind of like beneficial to have, just like general?
Yeah, I think for CGS, we haven't traditionally looked at other types of licensing. I mean, certifications probably help. If there's a GIS certificate, you can get for sort of toxic waste stuff. I think for the other agencies that deal with like groundwater issues, there's probably a lot of other stuff that's useful, but I'm not really familiar with what all they do.
Do you guys need the OSHA training?
No, not typically for CGS. We're not often like in areas where we need the OSHA training, but for going into consulting geology, that's highly desirable for a lot of jobs.
All right, speaking of consulting, should we move on to Steve?
Sure. Yeah, Tim, that was excellent. You covered a lot of stuff I did not, so
Cool.
That's perfect. Let's see. Okay, can people see my screen?
Yes.
All right, excellent. So I work at a private consulting firm, Lettuce Consultants International, and just some things about the company. Personally, I've been involved with this same group for about 18 years. I started working with the same core group of people right after my PhD and in a one-year postdoc. And the company as it is now, we're about a 40-person company headquartered, oh, this is old, we're now in Concord, but we're in Northern California primarily, but we also have personnel. We have a Southern California office in Valencia. We have other employees that are working out of near Boulder, Colorado, Augusta, Georgia, and a couple of other people kind of with their own satellite offices. We're somewhat unique in the consulting industry that we are almost entirely geologists with a few engineering seismologists. Most of the private consulting practices are really heavily geared towards the engineering aspects, and their geology group, to the extent they have one, is supporting the engineering. Our company works a little bit differently, where we try to provide high-end geological consulting and seismic hazard services, and we find ourselves teaming with larger architectural and engineering firms that are seismologists, that are engineering heavy, and we'll team with them when there's a particular project that requires you know, a specialty geology practice or a seismic hazards focus. Almost all of our technical geologists and seismologists have masters or PhDs. We're about half and half masters and PhDs, I think, right now. And as Tim mentioned, licensure is important. It's not critical for what we do, but we like to show that we have the licensing, and on particular projects, it is required. So right away, our entry staff level people are encouraged to study for and take the ASBOG and to get their PG licenses. It's kind of expected as you move up and become in a more senior role that you'll get your certified engineering geology degree or your professional engineering license for some of our engineers. The PG in California anyway is really a heavy requirement if you're going to go into more of the environmental consulting, if you're going to be working around landfills or other places where you're collecting samples for hazardous, for contamination, for groundwater contamination. A lot of those reports require PGs to sign off. The work we do typically doesn't directly require a PG, but again, it's just part of showing you have rounded professional qualifications. We encourage people to take them. Back to our company, we're completely employee owned. There are about 15 of us currently out of our 40-person company who are co-owners of the company, and that's one of the really nice aspects that we get to determine our own fate and make our own lousy decisions and okay decisions as things turn out, and that fosters a nice sense of kind of camaraderie within the company. The work that we do, we're really focused on large critical infrastructure projects. And that's mainly just the market. Those are the projects that can afford to hire and pay for high level geology investigation or a more sophisticated seismic hazard assessment or whatever particular thing we do. So the main gist, why do we get hired to do work? What's our purpose? We're really looking towards improving the resiliency or the reliability of infrastructure. So ultimately it comes down to some sort of risk metric. And so if we look at risk as kind of the combination of hazard and infrastructure fragility and the consequence of something bad happening, our focus has been really on that hazard aspect. And so we again team with engineers. It's really important. One of the contrasts a little bit to the CGS work is that a lot of their maps and projects are focused on a regional characterization, regional screening of hazard. We kind of take the work products that they generate and we really apply them and zero in on the site-specific assessment. And so the goal is that we help engineers design safe structures, or if they're existing structures, we help engineers evaluate just how vulnerable or how safe they are in their current form. And again, the focus really is on the critical facilities like this nuclear power plant we see here. A lot of the work, it's been less in the recent years, but about 5 years or so ago, back to about 18 years ago or so, there was a large hoped for nuclear renaissance in the US, particularly in the central and eastern US. And a lot of the nuclear facilities were looking to expand. And we had quite a bit of work doing the seismic hazard assessment, but also as shown here, doing a lot of the geotechnical drilling and coring to look at the foundation suitability and the foundation aspects. Other work we do, this is the Diablo Canyon power plant near in central coastal California. Tim, actually, the review gig that he mentioned, a big part of that was reviewing reports that our company generated that was looking at fine details of the location of active faults and the fault rupture hazard, or the fault, mostly the ground motion hazard, for faults either along the coast or directly offshore of the Diablo Canyon installation. So we had outstanding projects walking and mapping the coastline, looking for coastal expressions of this newly discovered fault zone called the shoreline fault. Other work that we do very commonly for existing dams that need updated seismic hazard assessments, or for other new critical infrastructure sites or pipelines, we will do fault characterizations, where we will be looking at the location and activity of active faults to provide input to either our group or some other group that will run the seismic hazard model. And so we do a lot of paleoseismic trenching. As far as OSHA certifications, we do almost all of our field staff do get an OSHA certification and a confined space training. And also quite a few of us have OSHA training in safe rope work, so they can do mapping down steep embankments or on dam faces, or so on and so forth. Other non-faulting work that we do, to the left, there's a certain part of our group that gets steady work doing landslide hazard mapping, including a multi-year tenure working in Hong Kong, looking at landslide hazards to their highway network. The slide on the right, Tim also showed a view of the Caldecott fourth bore in some of its earlier phases of work. This is towards completion, but our company provided some staff geologists to map the rock quality and rock discontinuities in advance of the Caldecott fourth bore. So that was some exciting, important local infrastructure work. One of the larger projects we have, one of our bigger clients right now is the state of California, the Department of Water Resources. As Tim mentioned, they do have their own staff of trained geologists, and we have a contract to support them and to augment their staff or to provide specialty services as needed. And a lot of people might be familiar with the Oroville dam or spillway emergency in the winter of 2016-17. And so there was an enormous storm event and release of water, and there was failure of the main spillway. And there's been a very large subsequent investigation as to the underlying cause of that spillway failure. And also looking at the reliability, first a repair of the spillway, and also the reliability of other infrastructure in the area, such as the emergency spillway, which is shown here as the auxiliary spillway. At the time, just had a very small concrete curtain, and then basically the auxiliary spillway was designed to naturally spill water over natural rock with all of its natural discontinuities. And you can see from the performance of the main spillway and just the extensive erosion that occurred with the natural rock following this emergency, there was a lot of concern about the performance and the reliability of the emergency spillway were it to need to be in use. So our geologists spent a lot of time mapping in the area of the failure and in some of the other areas around both this main spillway and the auxiliary spillway, really focused on looking at rock discontinuities and controls on scour. And so we worked with engineers to develop models for scour to see what sort of performance could be expected and what sort of results could be expected were there to be large discharge events over the natural rock again. These discontinuity mapping and identification of shear zones, again, this isn't for seismic hazard, this is for looking at just basic constructability concerns or erodibility concerns. So that's, and then just this final slide I have to share. This is what I personally have been doing quite a bit. It's become a fairly decent sector of our company, but it's focused on lifelines and focused on fault displacement hazard. So this is a photograph in the middle of a mitigation to the Hetch Hetchy Aqueduct as it crosses the Hayward Fault in Fremont, and it's in a restricted area between parts of interstate on-ramps, and so we had to help develop a very innovative design that would allow a large displacement event on the Hayward Fault to occur, and this pipe, which was put in compression, which normally for steel is very, very bad, the engineers following our input and interaction were able to design a system that would allow the pipe basically to compress on itself with a series of ball joints and slip joints to hopefully survive the next major Hayward Fault event. But that's, yeah, and here's another slide of a pipe retrofit. This is a PG&E gas pipeline crossing the Calaveras Fault, and this was a mitigation project that we worked on in the early 2000s with a bend imposed in the pipe, again as part of a mitigation strategy that would accommodate a large displacement event on the Calaveras Fault. So those are the slides I have. That's a little bit of a sense of what our company does, the types of projects we work on. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Maybe let's have one quick question from a student, and then would like to leave some time to hear from Alex as well.
If there's no questions from students, Steve, I just have a quickie. In the Caldecott, did you guys find any splays of the Hayward Fault or secondary faulting in the mountain there under the tunnel?
You know, that's a good question for JB. I don't know. I don't recall any big exciting events. There were a couple of fault zones that have been identified in the BART tunnels that are below and sort of adjacent, and Keith Kelson and I were looking and worried about those, but I honestly don't remember, so that would be a Baldwin question.
Okay, cool, thanks.
I was just going to ask a quick one. Steve, how do you guys do your recruitment? You just kind of keep your eye out for potential colleagues, employees everywhere, or?
Yeah, good.
Yeah,
great question. When we like to say we're always looking to hire. We always want to keep our ears out, but if we particularly have one or more positions open, we've tried various postings through the years through AGU or GSA. One of the best and most effective ways has been we will reach out to Ramon or now Rich and other professors who we know have active tectonic programs or paleoseismology programs or good active geomorphology programs, and we will ask to do postings within departments or just ask professors if they have any students who might be interested. And typically we're looking at those recent master's or PhD students. We've had some, ideally we look to hire for the long term. We have still had really successful relationships with recent PhDs who work for a few years with their company, kind of like a postdoc of sorts. And those arrangements have worked out great as well. Although, again, we're usually looking for people who are interested in seriously exploring a career in applied geology and consulting.
Thanks.
Just a quick comment from Rich. I worked at WLA, the previous company before LCI, where Steve works, and it took me about a year to get hired. So, they're really busy. So you just have to keep talking to them and show interest. So, and I'll talk more about that when I talk about my career in a couple weeks.
Right on.
Great, thank you, Steve. Alex, would you like to speak? Have the floor.
Sure, thanks, Chelsea. I'll just take a few minutes here. My name is Alex Sarmiento, and I think Steve and Tim did a really great overview from a couple of different perspectives. So I'll just do maybe an elevator pitch here of my experience. I did my undergraduate degree at UNR in geological engineering and my master's with Steve Wisnowski. And that's actually where I met Rich Kaler. We had some overlap in grad school. And after grad school, I moved down to Southern California to work for a small specialty geoscience firm. And ever since then, I've been a practicing geologist and engineer in the field. The firm is called Geopentech. There's about a dozen people, geotechnical engineers, geologists, hydrogeologists, and geophysicists. The bulk of my experience has been in earthquake engineering, so site-specific ground motions for infrastructure, which is just a fancy way of saying site-specific PISA and time histories and site response analysis, mostly for high-rises and hospitals and dams. Still a decent amount of conventional field geology experience, surface mapping and excavation mapping and whatnot, but the bulk of my background is in earthquake engineering. And I would say probably the coolest project that I've worked on is along the lines of what Steve alluded to, would be the San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station project. So Steve was up north dealing with Diablo Canyon, and Geopentech was down in the south handling San Onofre before it shut down for reasons not related to seismic. It was a really interesting project to work on the seismic source characterization and PISA for that. And one of the really cool things, circling back to what Tim said, is the networking. I had the opportunity to meet leading practitioners and academics throughout that project. And in fact, that's how I met Tim and Steve. And ultimately, that has led me to where I am now at UCLA as a researcher. And there's no way I would have ended up in this fault displacements project research position if I had not had that networking experience early on in my time at Geopentech. So that's where I am today. I'm a researcher at UCLA. I did consulting for 8 years full-time, and now last couple years at UCLA and consulting part-time, so 10 years of consulting experience in total. Maybe kind of also to really emphasize points that Tim and Steve made. From what I've seen, licensure is really important. I have my PG, CEG, and PE, and I feel like it has opened a lot of doors. And in fact, I've seen some people have some doors maybe closed to them because they weren't interested in pursuing licensure. So my experience, I think it's really important. Maybe another thing I'm surprised Steve didn't mention, but I think working for a small company is absolutely great. You get to wear a lot of hats and you're always learning, and working for a 20-person, 40-person company is very different than working for a 10,000-person national corporation. So keep the small companies in mind. You might really enjoy it. Last thing I would say is that I think my grad school experience was super valuable. Yeah, just the technical knowledge, but also just the kind of the resource management and working through things on your own. It's great to come to the table with that. So that was the law and elevator ride, but well, I'll just stop there.
Great, thank you, Alex. So now I'd be happy to open up for students to ask either Steve or Alex any questions that you have.
This is Chris. I'm not a student, but I wanted to ask Steve or Alex about an aspect that I don't know if you touched upon. I've been coming in and out. There's kind of an economic cycle with consulting, especially small companies, hiring up for projects, having to let people go when those projects go away. Can either of you speak to those? I saw Tim's 20 to life slide where people at CGS are there until they retire out. That's not always the same in the consulting industry.
Yeah, this is Steve. I'll try to tackle that. So I think hopefully there are very few companies who hire with kind of a knowledge that they're going to let somebody go. Whenever we take posting a position and filling a position very seriously, and want to make sure that it's that when we do make a hire, we have the work to support them, and we try to balance the shorter term needs where we really have to staff up for very large immediate projects versus long-term needs. One of the ways that we handle that is if we know that there's a particularly large field effort, for example, the summer program of doing extensive drilling and mapping at Oroville, we augmented our permanent staff with summer hires. And those summer hires had a really clear understanding that they were being hired for a specific job. And there was no kind of commitment to longer term hiring. Through that process, though, we did identify 2 or 3 just excellent geologists, and we were able to make them offers and add them to our permanent staff. So there is, I'm not going to pretend that the job security is anywhere comparable to the state, but in our practice and experience, it's very rare that we need to let somebody go for lack of work.
Yeah, I'd second that from my experience at Geopentech as well. I feel like the general Geopentech runs a lean staff that's always has a little too much work to do, rather than having too much staff and not enough work to do.
Yeah.
So that's a good question, though, to ask when you start job hunting. You can gently ask that.
Yeah, I will say those summer hires, they do provide great opportunities to for both the young geologists really wanting to understand if they're interested in the consulting environment and atmosphere. It's a great way to make some money, put something on your resume, and to try out a career. For the company, it's wonderful to get to know the person and see how they operate in the field and operate with colleagues and get a sense for if they would be a good fit for the company. So that might be something towards the summer if you're undecided, looking to see if there's summer hire opportunities in particular is not a bad way to go.
This is Chris again. I wanted to mention one other thing for the getting the job. So networking is important and experience is important. But when you're going in for that interview and preparing your resume to apply for a job, it's been my experience that it's really helpful to frame your experience in terms of what that company or agency does. Like use buzzwords from the job announcement or from their website or projects that you've heard of. Just connect your experience to those things, and then that forms a connection. And when the people that are doing the hiring are trying to see how you fit in their company or agency, you've already started building that bridge. And then you can continue doing that during the interview. But that's really important.
Yeah, that's Chris. That's a great point. When we do receive when we do receive a letter of interest, it comes. We feel that we can tell very quickly whether someone is truly interested in our company versus someone who just generically is out fishing and hunting for a job. And so at a minimum, understanding through the website, through whatever other interactions you can get, what that company does and what they're about, and reflect that in your resume or in a cover letter, that helps tremendously. I'd also say try hard to look for an advocate within the company. If you submit a resume somewhat blind without much context, unfortunately, it's a lot more difficult to get noticed. And if you are able to, through your advisor or another professor or somehow find another connection to a person within the company, then you have a better chance of having an advocate for you in that company who will make sure that your resume gets considered and gets considerable attention. And I don't think that's the ideal way for the world to work, but I do find that is helpful. So that's something else to consider as you're if you're putting resumes out there for private consulting work. I guess the last thing I'll say, we always are looking for people with good writing ability. And it has become one of the most difficult places of expertise to find young out of graduate school staff who can write a very clear and good report. So please, professors, make your students do a lot of writing, and please, students, really work on your technical writing skills.
Yeah, this was
one reason why we asked you guys to write a full report for each of your mapping assignments is to practice these writing skills.
That good mindfulness and good writing are incredibly valuable.
Yeah, it reminds me of one of the consulting companies that I worked for. They liked hiring masters as opposed to PhDs because PhDs just wrote too much.
Too long-winded, huh?
We're almost out of time, but Ramon raised his question or his hand.
Oh, I was just this exact point I was going to ask Steve right before you said it, but the writing, it's like I'd have to probably call you in for a 5-minute sort of cameo in my field geology class because, we always say, okay, field geology, we're teaching field geology 1. It's really important that you learn all these skills, but don't forget about the writing. It's even more important maybe than some of the field work. And I think it's in a way the hardest work of that class is the writing, and also it's the hardest to grade. You know, it's very difficult grading writing, I find, but it's obviously so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this is Rich. So we've since I got to UNR the last 5 years, we've instilled a writing final report as part of our field methods class, which didn't exist before. And yeah, you're right, Ramon. It's really hard to grade, but it's, you know, it's practice. You guys need to practice writing and writing up field results. So we've got that going in our field methods class now.
Great.
All right, well, thank you very much, Steve and Alex, and also Tim, for speaking today.
Yeah, that was great.
That was so awesome. Thank you.
And we'll hear later in the semester more from Chris and Rich about their experience as well. So students, if you have any questions that were answered today, it's a great opportunity. Wait a couple weeks and you can ask another session to ask your questions and hear about their experiences as well. So class is now finished, and I had one request for talk about the mapping project. If there's other people who want to talk about their mapping project with a different instructor or with me, then we can make breakout rooms.